Every once in a while, a car just comes along and I have to share it with my audience because it's so over the top, I guess, is the only way to phrase this. This is a 1971 Thunderbird Sport Coupe that I saw at a local car show, finished in Rangoon Red, a color that you don't normally see on these Thunderbirds, but I think it's pretty befitting of the car. You let me know. Put a comment in the comments section. Now, the first thing you notice about this particular 71 Thunderbird, this is the last year, by the way, before they would redesign the Thunderbird for 1972 and it would become the so-called Big Bird. This is the waning years of the Glamour Bird that was introduced for the 1967 model year. But here you notice the distinctive, almost arrowhead-like point to the front end of the car, clearly something that couldn't be done after the bumper standards were enacted in 1973 for the front of the vehicles. And notice the bumper doesn't even extend underneath the headlamps. It just is in the midsection of the car. But regardless, that particular form of the hood and the front header panel, I guess I'll call it, was clearly an homage to Pontiac. Now, why in the world would Ford try to emulate Pontiac on not only the 1970 and 71 Thunderbird, but also the 1971 LTD? Well, recall that during this time frame that Ford had a new president, and his name was Bunky Knudsen, and he came from General Motors, where at one point in time he had previously led the Pontiac division. I believe when Ford hired him, he was leading the overseas operations. Regardless, when he came to Ford, he had distinctive ideas about design, and one of the things that he asked designers to do was to make Fords look more like Pontiacs. And I think that was because Pontiac division was having some great success. 1968 was a record year for sales for Pontiac, and so why not try to emulate one of the best? And I think to some degree it kind of works, although that bird beak or Knudsen nose, as some people call it on this car, I could kind of do without it, I suppose. But the rest of the vehicle is pretty cool, if not over-the-top kitschy in a number of ways that we're going to talk about. But it's not just that beak up front that's very Pontiac-y. It's the overall shape of the hood and the front. Notice you have the tall kind of fenders that have a relatively crisp leading edge up top. A little bit different from Pontiac. Then you've got not only the fender top, but you've got in the front three-quarter view, you notice you have this feature line that kind of runs the length of the car and runs below the belt line and then kind of tucks up into the rear quarter glass. But the hood form overall, where you have this catwalk area in between the fender peak and the prow of the hood, very Pontiac-like form, the fillet that is kind of increasing in size as it approaches the front of the vehicle, very similar to the 1973 Grand Am that we just discussed. One thing that isn't very Pontiac-y on this car are the body-colored wheels that you see here with the slots in them. That was something that was drawn from European cars of the time. I don't know about the slots in the wheel covers, but you didn't see anything like this on a Pontiac, really, that I can recall. It's a pretty heavily loaded car, too. This one has cornering lamps up front. Wait till you see the vinyl roof and the interior on this in just a second. And as we rotate around to the side of the car, we have pretty dramatically sculpted, at least for Ford Motor Company during this time frame, side profile here, or near side profile, still rotated a little bit towards the front. But notice you have this beautiful kind of crease that runs the length of the car that here is accentuated by a body side molding. I don't know how I feel about that body side molding accentuating a crease. I guess at least it's accentuating a feature line on the car. But then you have a number of different kind of features and surfaces. Notice, for example, that surface that forms on the aft portion of the vehicle, just aft of the door, and gives the rear of the car a little bit of a Coke bottle shape. It doesn't flare out in plan view as much as other Coke bottle cars, but you certainly get this graphic from the side where that surface kind of scoops up along with the window graphic and then nicely tapers at the rear of the car. A little bit General Motors-y with that rear taper on the vehicles. Wasn't seen on a lot of Fords. Fords often had a pretty upright rear. So did Chryslers during, well, not necessarily this time period. I guess so. The fuselage era cars don't really have much in the way of tapered rear. Speaking of which, there's a fuselage Chrysler, I believe that's a 72 Newport just on the other side of this Thunderbird. And you also can see there's a number of creases and feature lines on this car. Aside from the one I just mentioned, look at the feature line that starts at the front of the vehicle and then works its way all the way back, as I was mentioning before, and just below the belt line, then kind of tucks up into the rear quarter glass. Then you have the top of the fender, which also kind of runs that length of the fender and then kicks up near the A-pillar. So you have a lot of these feature lines that are kind of curving and curving upward as they go across the vehicle, except that rearmost one that starts to go downward with the taper of the car. So pretty complex surfacing on this 71 Thunderbird, especially, like I said, for a Ford Motor Company vehicle. And as we rotate to the rear three-quarter view of the vehicle, notice how that feature line that I mentioned that kind of kicks up near the C-pillar and then goes down with the taper just gradually sort of fades out as it comes to the rear. It's not quite faded out by the time it's at the end of the car, but it's less sharp than it was up front. Again, just a beautiful detail. You can see up near the backlight, you have the flow-through ventilation system on these Thunderbirds that actually work quite well. You could kind of smoke your way to the hospital with the windows up, and all of the cigarette smoke or cigar smoke would come out the back. They did have great flow-through ventilation systems. The Mark IIIs, upon which that were based upon the Thunderbirds, also had that, and other Ford cars had that too. And like I said, they really did work great. Out back, you have the full wall-to-wall tail lamp that is just gorgeous, kind of in an inverted U shape a little bit too. A la maybe a bit of an homage to the Pontiacs of the era just a few years before. Maybe that's a bit of a stretch, but I at least can see it. Wouldn't be surprised if that was some inspiration. But you do have a very Thunderbird-style theme here with the barbell theme on the deck lid. In other words, you have a relatively narrow section in the middle, and then it flares out at the ends, something that the 1966 Tornado would do on the front end of the car. Here, the front end of the Thunderbird, as you saw, didn't have that barbell theme, but the rear end certainly did. And the whole purpose of that is just to give the rear some dimension. Imagine if that deck lid were just flat. Wouldn't look nearly as cool as the fact that it has this barbell theme. I kind of wish they had continued that up into that vent area, the rear vents underneath the backlight, and made that Dutchman panel have a similar surface to it. And as we now turn to the passenger side, this particular view with the light and how it's breaking over the vinyl roof, you can actually read a crease that comes from the roof down the C-pillar and then forms the top of the quarter panel. That must be a very sharp crease to read through what is a very thick vinyl rooftop. Wait till you see this vinyl rooftop with the faux alligator kind of skin. It is so crazy and over the top. It is absolutely unbelievable. I don't know what Ford designers were thinking, but I have to say it's pretty cool even all these years later. I will also point out that in the middle of the rear section of the car, you notice that there's no trunk lock here. And where is it? Well, it's hidden in the wording, the Thunderbird wording underneath the Thunderbird logo there on the tail lamp. You just move that out of the way, and that's how you unlock the trunk if you don't have the remote trunk release. But again, take a look at the surfacing on this and how many different surfaces this car has on the quarter alone. You've got the surface that comes down from the roof. Then you've got another one that it kind of goes up and over the rear wheel. Then you have the one that is riding along with the body side molding. Just a gorgeous design overall. And again, something pretty atypical from what you would be used to from Ford of the era with, lack of the taper out back and this kind of fill-the-box design, very 61 Continental-esque design for many Fords. But this Thunderbird Sport Coupe is pretty awesome. Take a look here at the vinyl roof with this texture, this kind of faux alligator grain texture. I can't think of any other car that had a similar vinyl top, but it's pretty sweet. Now let's rotate around to the interior because this Thunderbird has the awesome optional hop sack cloth interior with bucket seats in the center console. I don't know why Ford decided to use hop sack cloth. And this, again, is the optional interior, the luxurious interior, the brome interior, and it's got hop sack cloth. I don't know what to say about that. But it's pretty sweet. I probably would have ordered it. It looks great in black. The wood grain here is fake, but Ford did a great job with their fake wood grain. I love it on the steering wheel. This is a rim blow steering wheel where you pinch the rim to honk the horn or to just accidentally honk the horn as you go around the corner. And on the Thunderbird, you also have these beautiful round gauges, full complement of gauges, everything from coolant temperature there out left and the fuel gauge. You obviously have the speedometer, you have a charging, discharging gauge, and then you also have, to the right of that, the windshield wiper control and the rear vent control. The windshield wipers on these Thunderbirds are actually powered by the power steering pump. Yes, I said that right. So it's not an electric motor, it's actually hydraulic. And when you rotate that round knob that you see there on the dash, it opens and closes an orifice, and they're continuously variable speed. There's no delay wipe feature on these, but you can slow them down to a crawl, you can speed them up. And I thought that was kind of a cool way of coming up with an alternate way of having kind of delay wipers, just slowing or speeding up the speed of the wiper itself. This was something that Thunderbirds had for a number of years prior to this, and it would it would basically be discontinued after the 1971 model year. Then the 1972 and later Thunderbirds would have the traditional delay wipe features as options. And here's a close-up of the hop sack high back bucket seats. It's just crazy looking. Ford had these high back bucket seats just for a few years across a number of cars, from really 1971 to 73. They were often optional. You could get them, obviously, here in the Thunderbird. You could get them in the full-size Fords, Mercurys, and I really like them. I think they're very comfortable. Apparently, ladies didn't always like them because their ponytail would kind of brush up against the high back seat, and as compared to the seats at the time that didn't have the high back. But this was better for safety, and having owned cars with these seats, they are quite comfortable. So if you're able to get a Ford with these high back seats, I would highly recommend it. They're more comfortable, I would say, than the GM and the Chrysler seats of the era. And like I said, they were just produced by Ford for a few years, really 1971 to 1973. And lastly, rotating under hood in your 1971 Thunderbird, you had basically one engine, and that was the standard 429 cubic inch 4 Venturi. That's what the 4V is, or 4-barrel carburetor. This was the 385 series V8. Later you could get a 460 cubic inch engine or variant of this in Thunderbirds. But for 1971, the 460 was still a Lincoln exclusive. That would stop in 1972 when the 460 would become optional partway through the model year on various Fords as well as Mercurys. But for 1971, you got this premium fuel 429 4 Venturi V8 that made 360 gross horsepower. It was decently peppy. I mean, remember, this is not a light car, but plenty of torque, really smooth engine. And you'll notice this car also has the typical Ford standard 2-piston style York Tecumseh air conditioning compressor. Later, the Thunderbirds, beginning with the 1972 model year, would go to a better air conditioning compressor that was sourced from General Motors. There was really only one transmission available on these Thunderbirds, and that was Ford's wonderful C6 transmission. It did rob quite a bit of power and take a lot of power to operate because it was so heavy duty, but the C6s are very reliable. Only thing about them is they shift more firmly than General Motors and Chrysler transmissions of the era, but some people like that. I prefer the smoother shifting transmissions, but really don't complain about the C6s. They are just fine. So what do you think about this 1972 Thunderbird? Is it over the top? Is it cool? Is it kitschy? Is it awesome? Put an adjective in the comment section. Let me know what you think. Let's have a little fun. Just put one adjective. See what other people say. Thanks again for watching.